not to talk about what people's opinion in COVID and the pandemic. Like, we just had the most unique 2 years of my life, of my 43 years, that it was just wild. Good, bad, it shouldn't have even been a side. It shouldn't have been politics.
Right.
But it's negatively impacted education.
Mm-hmm.
And I tie a lack of education, how much education, what level of importance it's placed in the home, poverty, how that ties in. I bet you had a lot of experience and engagement and understanding about poverty in our city, in our area.
Yeah.
Do you have an opinion? I'm not trying to. Do you have an opinion on, generational poverty, our education system? I was in a meeting, and the reason why I asked this, I was in a meeting of a lot of influential people. Don't know why I got invited. I'm getting invited to some more of these things more and more with the real estate company I run. And I saw stats from all the Northern Kentucky educational stats over the past 2 and 3 years. And kids really suffered.
Yes, they did.
Right? In a terrible way.
Yep.
But what you see is the kids in the areas that you think they would suffer the most, they did.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
You could pull out 2 or 3 of these high-performing school districts. Those kids didn't suffer as much in the pandemic.
Sure.
Right? So do you have opinions, or even more than opinions, do you have expertise and knowledge about poverty, education in the communities? How in the heck do we help and try to fix that problem?
Well, I'm a product of public schools. You mentioned that you are.
Mm-hmm.
I've learned through covering education for many years in the newsrooms that in many cases, and I'm not calling out teachers individually, but their unions are a huge obstacle to solving these problems because they have become so politicized and because their bottom line is always financial. And the interests of the children are often really a way deep second or third place compared to what's on the agenda. And it's really a shame. When you brought up the whole COVID thing, too, it just seems to me this ties right into what we're talking about. People do not trust our institutions. They don't trust the experts anymore. The experts are untrustworthy. In many cases, they were giving us complete lies and nonsense. And that divided us. And the media didn't help because it chose sides and totally tried to marginalize and banish any thought or opinions that contradicted the quote-unquote narrative. So what happens is that just alienates people farther. They have less trust for not only now the media and the institutions, and then you have this national crisis where, one of our great existential crises of facing this pandemic, which could have been much worse, really, was caused and made much worse by this distrust and by the divisions that happened around it politically.
Yeah. I think, because the issue with me when I started processing this, I remember back to March 14th or 16th of 2020, running a company. And it's like, wow, there's something really unique happening here. And I remember we thought social distance was the answer. They were actually telling us in the beginning, not masks, all this stuff. There's all these things, and then masks. But I remember gathering in a circle with the managers and the leadership of my company, and there's 6 of us. We had never done this before. In a circle, 6 feet apart, on the 14th or 16th, having a conversation like, hey, what do we do?
Yeah.
Right? And I remember saying, because at first it was, we sent them home for 2 or 3 weeks. And then we sent them home for 6 weeks. But I didn't get to go home. Somebody had to keep the thing running.
Yeah.
Someone had to.
Uh-huh.
And then, I'm in the real estate business, that was deemed essential. So then,
who makes these decisions?
It was fascinating.
Yeah.
And so I personally really quick made a judgment that I don't know who to trust.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what you're talking about. And I'm really curious, and I try to vet out because
casinos are essential. Yeah. Churches are not.
Isn't it wild?
What?
It's so wild to me.
It's just unbelievable when you look back on it.
And so how can we trust it? But so I was this is something about this education piece. So I was sitting in this meeting, and we hear funding so much.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We're like, money fixes the problem.
Yes. Money, that's the biggest myth going.
So here's what I saw. I saw for the first time on a screen the exact per spend per student in all of our school districts. It was on the screen.
Isn't it shocking?
In Newport, Kentucky, one of the most underperforming districts right now in Northern Kentucky. Not saying anything bad about superintendents, not bad about teachers. It's the facts.
Yes.
It's underperforming by the same test scores as Fort Thomas, as Beechwood, the public schools, Boone County, Campbell County, Kenton County, somewhere in there. But here's the fact. $23,000 are spent each year.
Wow.
For each kid
Per pupil.
In the Newport Independent Schools. $3,000 of that goes towards administration, which is too much, but $20,000 per pupil. It's more than any of the kids in any of those districts.
See, that's the whole problem. I think you put your finger right on it. It's that we've been trying to solve these problems by throwing money at them, and it's so much bigger than that.
Yep.
What does it come down to? It comes down to parents being involved.
Okay, so
the parents who homeschooled their kids or helped them through, they're going to be okay.
Here's the fact. I grabbed the mic in that meeting, full of a lot of influential people, and I could feel it was very unpopular what I said. I looked to, I'm not going to say what positions, but positions in the school systems. I looked to them and said, hey, can you all just answer me one question? There's nonprofit people, all political sides. I said, you ask me one question. First off, I said, I grew up food stamp poor in the public school system, and I got invited to this room today. I'm pretty sure it turned out okay.
Mm-hmm.
So the question is, did I have more or fewer resources when I grew up in the public school system than they do now? And they're like, Mark, they have more now.
Absolutely.
Okay. So I said, okay.
Undebatable.
One more question. If those kids that go home, and this is very unpopular, and I don't care, I just want to talk about the facts. If those kids that go home to the top performing school districts, if the kids in the low performing school districts went home to the same homes that those kids in the top performing school districts, will we be dealing with the problems we deal with? And they wouldn't answer it.
Wow.
A person who is passionate about whatever, letting people off the hook, whatever, grabbed a mic and responded for the people I was asking the question to.
Oh.
Right?
Yeah.
And I just went, okay.
Because you're disrupting the narrative.
That's it. So, I said, I was like, you know what? I don't belong in these rooms.
Yeah. There's always a line, an agenda. You can call it the narrative if you want. I like narrative because that's what you hear in newsrooms now. A narrative comes from fiction. So
what do we do with this? So here's my perspective. Whether it's generational poverty or whatever, I think they're just going home to families, and sometimes not. They're going home to places that they just don't put an emphasis on education.
Yes.
I don't know if they don't know how. I don't know if they weren't trained to, but that's the facts. And the problem is I don't know how we fix that problem.
Well, that takes me back to a school board meeting we had with one of the superintendents in the Cincinnati public school system who came in, and we talked to him about the fact that their graduation rate was below 20% for their high school, which is unbelievable to me.
Can't comprehend it.
I couldn't believe it. And we asked the superintendent, honestly, what do you think could be done to fix this? And he said, this is going to be radical and unpopular, but I would say we'd have to build dorms and put those kids in a place where they get 3 meals and they get attention and they have somebody, an adult who will tell them to do their homework and to show some support. He said, that's the answer. And we put that in an editorial, and I'm telling you, all hell broke loose.
Do you know what? That's the exact same opinion I have.
It was amazing.
You got to
The whole system was so set up against any idea that you would do that. It was like, how dare you suggest? It was
okay, so give me a better suggestion that's going to fix the problem.
More money. That's always the same answer.
Yeah. So you're not.
Teachers aren't paid enough.
Well, so here's the thing. So maybe they aren't.
Administrators, we don't have enough administrators.
Maybe we don't, but that's a separate problem. I just know this. The teachers weren't paid any more per capita when I was growing up.
A lot less.
Fewer administrators.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
I went home to a poor family.
Yep.
But my parents expected me to do my homework.
It all starts there.
They expected me that when we took a test, they expected me to do well.
Yep. It starts there. It starts in the community you're living in. If you're in a community, even if you have caring parents, you can be in a community where everybody beats you down and holds you up to ridicule if you have answers in class. That you're you don't fit. You're the square peg.
And I asked this through this conversation. I said, hey, guys, I think we're putting a lot on public education that doesn't belong on your shoulders.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're trying to blame you through these test scores for things that don't identify if this is happening here or not. Right? Even if unions aren't the best and all that, it's like, hey, we're holding you accountable for things you don't control.
Absolutely, and that's why over the years I always supported charter schools and school choice to let parents take that $23,000 and move it to the school of their choice. Because that's their money. That's allocated for their child.
You know
right?
what the counter to that is, right? Well, then the public school system will fall apart. And I'm like, so here is the issue. It's because I want to say, well, then be better. But here's the question. Do they have no control over that?
Well, you mean, do they have control over the
kids and the test scores? And right? So I just, that's the question. So me, because I'm running a business. I'm about accountability. I'm like, okay, then make sure your kids perform better and the parents don't want to take them to the charter school. But then on the other hand, I'm like, well, we're blaming you for something you don't control. So what do we do?
Well, I mean, it comes down to that child, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And what's best for the child and what's best for that family. And for the parents that are stuck in those systems that are motivated to lift their children up so that they can be successful and rise above that, then I think it's just absolutely, there's no question, you should let them go. You can't hold them trapped in a failing system just because the system's failing.